Alright guys, and welcome back to the channel, and today I will be giving you my full card predictions and full card breakdown for UFC 314 live Saturday, April 12th, and I absolutely cannot wait to get into it, and we're going to go right ahead and jump right into the very first fight of the night, which is Nora Knoll versus Haley Cowan, and a interesting fight here at women's bantamweight. Nora Knoll looking, pretty decent in the UFC so far, coming in with a win over Jocelyn Edwards by unanimous decision, Melissa Mullins by KO, and then is coming off the loss to Jacqueline Cavalcante. And over on the other side, we have Haley Cowan, who is pretty new here. Is coming off a loss to Jamie Lynn Horth about a year and 10 months ago, almost 2 years ago. Before that, she was coming off Dana White's Contender Series and picked up a split decision over there. And in this fight, it's a pretty interesting matchup with Nora Knoll coming out of France. She's looked pretty impressive outside of that most recent loss. She's showing some really good stand-up skill. She just looks pretty well-rounded. And Haley Cowan, not looking incredibly good in the Jamie Lynn Horth fight. And Jamie Lynn Horth is not that good at all. She's very low level. So that is very concerning. And this girl has not fought in almost 2 years. So that's even more concerning. And Nora Knoll, she fought, I want to say, it was about 5 months ago. Off the top of my head, I was thinking just a few months ago. And, she did look pretty solid in that fight, even though it was a close split decision loss. And in this fight, I think it's pretty cut and dry. It's pretty simple. I think Nora Knoll will be the better fighter standing. I think she'll have the better striking, she'll have the better range, she'll have the better pace, and I think she will outwork Haley Cowan in this fight. And I am going to go ahead and pick Nora Knoll by decision on this one. And moving on up to the very next fight, we are looking at Tresean Gore versus Marco Tulio in a very interesting fight here at men's middleweight. Tresean Gore, looking pretty impressive recently, picking up some submission wins against, pretty decent competition, coming off the win against Antonio Tricali. Before that, the submission guillotine choke over Josh Friend. And Marco Tulio looked very impressive in his most recent fight, which was against Ior Peteria. Looked very impressive in that fight, busted Ior up really badly and looked very solid on the feet. Very scary stand-up skills, very good power, very good technique. And, even though it's a pretty interesting fight here for Tresean, and he does have some good jiu-jitsu skills, he's pretty decent on the feet, I think Marco Tulio is he's got that next level power, that next level technique on the feet, and I think he's very dangerous, and he is going to eventually clip Tresean Gore with a big shot in this fight, and I think it's probably going to happen early. It's a possibility that he catches him. It's a pretty competitive first round, and he catches him in the second round, but I think Marco Tulio is just going to put the pressure on him, put the hands on him, and I don't think Tresean Gore is going to capitalize on a mistake. I don't see him submitting him. I don't see him taking Marco down, and I think Marco's going to keep that space. He's eventually going to close in and find that shot, and I am going to go with Marco Tulio by first round KO in this one. All right, moving on up. We are flying through these early prelims. We are looking at Dan 50K Ige versus Sean Woodson, and this is a very interesting fight at featherweight here. Dan Ige is a longtime veteran. He's been in the UFC for a while. He's had a lot of great performances. He's got great boxing, great hands, good speed, good technique, but he has had it rough lately. He is coming off losses from Lerone Murphy. Then before that, the very short notice fight where he had to step in and fight Diego Lopes. We won't knock him for that because he literally took the fight the night of the fight. So no knock there. He did have the knockout win against Andre Fili, and then before that, the decision loss to Bryce Mitchell. But over on the other hand, we are looking at Sean Woodson, and Sean Woodson has been a sneaky problem in the division. He is very long, very tall for middleweight. He's 6'2". He's got a 78-inch reach, which is crazy. I mean, just his size, his frame at featherweight, and he is just sneaky good on the feet. He uses his range very well. He stays very long. He stays really busy with the hands. He's always throwing something at you, and he really overloads the senses when he comes at you with these shots that he sets up, and he's just very long and very good at using that lanky range. And, in this fight, Dan Ige, he's good at pressure. He's good at getting in. His boxing is sharp. He's usually pretty good at closing distance on guys and kind of getting inside, throwing a shot here and there. But, historically, he has struggled a little bit with certain guys on the feet that just more present, kind of a speed and a length problem for him. And, I kind of went back and forth on this a little bit, and I could see a world where Dan Ige could press Sean Woodson, get in, land some shots here and there. But I don't think he's going to be able to hit Sean Woodson that cleanly. And Sean Woodson rolls with shots very, very well. He does get hit occasionally, and sometimes there's been once or twice where he seems like he was maybe stunned for a second. But Sean Woodson is just one of those guys where he's just slipping and dodging, and shots are just grazing him or just missing. So he's very good defensively, he's very sound, and he's very, very long. He is going to have a 7-inch reach on Dan Ige, plus a massive chunk of height on him. And I just can't see Dan coming in and landing enough shots to take these rounds. I think Sean is going to stay long. I think he's going to stay, he's going to keep that length. He's going to keep that space. And he's just going to pepper Dan Ige, and he's going to edge these rounds on volume. So, Dan Ige is probably, to win this fight, he is probably going to have to really come in and land just a bomb on Sean Woodson and knock him out. I don't think Dan Ige is going to win a 15-minute striking battle with Sean Woodson, because the volume, the length, and that reach is going to be tremendous. So in this fight, even though Dan Ige is, he's a veteran, he's a very good boxer, he's got good hands, I think Sean Woodson is going to edge this fight probably 30-27, maybe a 29-28 in there. Maybe Dan steals around, maybe clips him with some big shots. But I think Sean Woodson is just too long. He's too good with the striking. He keeps that range very, very solidly and very tight. And I think it's going to wind up getting him the job done here against Dan Ige. But it could be a very close fight. It could wind up being a split decision, and Dan could steal it with power shots and better boxing. But I'm going to stick with Sean Woodson to stay long and get it done. All right, and moving on up, we are looking at Cedriquis Dumas versus Michael Oleksiejczuk, and a very interesting matchup here at middleweight. Cedriquis Dumas, he's pretty new to the UFC. He's had a few fights so far, and the kid looks like he has potential. He's got pretty good striking. It's still developing. It's not quite there yet, but he has had some pretty good wins against Cody Brundage, Abu Azaitar, and then he did have the unfortunate loss to Nursultan Ruziboev, but that is no knock on him, because Nursultan Ruziboev is a absolute beast. He is insanely big for the division, one of the tallest fighters in the division. He is massive, and he's got a lot of range. And in that fight, he poked Cedriquis in the eye, and Cedriquis, the ref didn't see it. He was backing up going, "Hey, I got poked. The ref didn't step in, and Ruziboev just closed in and just started hitting him with shots, unloading, and TKO'd him. So I won't knock him too much for that loss, because he did get poked in the eye, and it was a foul, and it wasn't caught. But then he bounced back with the win against Dennis Tululin. But then on the other hand, you look at Michael Oleksiejczuk. He has been in the UFC for quite a while now. He's kind of a veteran at this point. He's had a lot of fights, a lot of wins, a lot of losses, and you can see here on the record, coming off the loss to Sharon Magomedov, Bullet, then Kevin Holland wound up getting him to the ground, wound up wrapping up an armbar on him. And before that, the loss to Michelle Pereira, who's just a tornado storm for anybody to fight. But outside of that, Michael Oleksiejczuk, he's got good boxing, he's got good power, and he has knocked many guys out. And in this fight, it's the battle of the veteran with good striking and boxing versus the up-and-coming developing fighter with pretty good striking and pretty good boxing. But even though I would love to give Cedriquis Dumas a chance in this fight, I think he's a little too green still. His striking is looking pretty good, but it's not fully where it needs to be yet. He's still developing. He's going to get there eventually. But his striking is a little more mild-paced. It's a little, shot here and there. It's nothing super sharp. There's not a whole lot of speed and technique and quick power to it. It's just okay. But Michael Oleksiejczuk, for all of his faults and all of the losses that he's had, he's still got really good hands. He's got veteran hands. Those hands are developed. He's been doing this a lot longer than Cedriquis Dumas, even though they're about the same age. But, even though I would love to give Cedriquis a chance in this fight, I think Michael Oleksiejczuk's boxing is just going to get this done. I don't think he's going to knock Cedriquis out. Cedriquis has been pretty tough, and he's been able to take shots outside of that Nursultan Ruziboev KO. But I think in this fight, Michael Oleksiejczuk is going to just outbox him for 15 minutes. I think it's going to be a fun fight. I think it's going to be back and forth. It's going to be a strike fest. But I think Oleksiejczuk is just going to have the better, more veteran boxing, the better technical hands, and he should get this done. Now, there is a world where Cedriquez comes out, and is just looking sharper and better than ever, and he's made leaps and bounds since this Dennis Tululan fight, but I don't think it's quite there yet. I think he's got another few fights to go, and I think Michael Oleksiejczuk is just going to put the pace, the head movement, the hands on him, and he will out-edge these rounds in the striking. All right, we are moving on up to Darren the Damage Elkins versus Julian Erosa, and a very fun fight here at featherweight. Darren Elkins is an absolute UFC veteran, one of the top reigning long-time UFC veterans. And, he's just a dog. He's gritty. He's not very good in any one particular area. His striking is not good. His technique is not good. He does have good grappling. He does have good wrestling. He is a dog, and he's got pretty good cardio. But Darren Elkins' biggest downfall, his biggest negative, is just his defense. He has terrible defense. He's very wide open, and he takes a ton of damage. And that's why he has the most atrocious UFC tattoo. By a long shot, the worst tattoo in UFC history on his chest. It's not in this picture, but if you've been watching Darren Elkins for many years like I have, you see that horrible The Damage tattoo in like stitches and terrible lettering on his chest. And he has that tattoo for a reason. He takes a shit ton of damage in fights, and it's not good. It's not good for his brain health. It's not good for his face and all the scar tissue, because when Darren Elkins fights, it's guaranteed he's going to bleed. It's guaranteed he's going to get cut open. It's guaranteed he's going to be busted up looking like sloth. So, with Darren Elkins, it's just the amount of damage that he takes in these fights is just, it's crazy. And he does have the wrestling. He does have a pretty decent pace, but he's just sloppy in his technique. He's sloppy in his execution. And Julian Erosa, he's a little hit and miss. Sometimes he comes into fights and, he makes big IQ mistakes, and he winds up getting clipped and knocked out, and it was looking rough for him for a while. But he has bounced back with some very good submission wins in his last two fights against Christian Rodriguez and Ricardo Ramos. So when Julian is, when he calms down and he gets his head in the game and he approaches the fight with, a good game plan, and he listens to his corner, he does good work. And, even though historically Darren Elkins has pulled off some massive upset wins, the one against Mirsad Bektik back about 6-7 years ago, where he was getting beat in that fight and then he head kicked Mirsad against the cage and knocked him out. Darren will pull some stuff out of his ass and pull off wins, but he is 40 years old. He has taken a tremendous amount of damage in these fights, and his technique is just not good. Outside of solid grappling and good cardio and that dog heart, he's just not good. And Julian Erosa, even though he's not great, and he does have mental lapses in there, he is the better striker. He has the better technique. And in this fight, I think there is a good chance that Darren Elkins is going to shoot in on Julian, and he's going to wind up getting caught in a guillotine. I think he's going to get caught in a choke. Now, if he doesn't, he's just going to get outstruck for 15 minutes. He could pull out the dog. He could take Julian down, sling him around, but I really don't see it happening. I think Julian is starting to kind of find a little bit of a groove, even at 35, and he will be the better striker on the feet clearly all day. Anybody that Darren fights is always the better striker just because of his poor defense. But I think Darren is going to shoot in at a point, and Julian is going to wrap him up and grab a submission. So we are going to pick Julian Erosa by second round sub. I think the first round is going to be interesting. It's going to be competitive. Darren could wind up shooting in right away and getting his neck caught, but I think it'll be kind of back and forth. Darren might get a takedown. Julian gets up, but then in that second round, I think Darren is going to shoot in and he's going to wind up getting caught with something. If that doesn't happen, then Julian is going to wind up beating him 30-27 on the cards, maybe a 29-28. But we are going to go with Julian Juicy J, terrible nickname, by second round submission. All right, and we are moving on up to Suma Darji versus Mitch Raposo. And, very fun fight here at flyweight. Interesting fight because Mitch Raposo, he came in, I believe, on short notice when he fought Andre Lima. I think it was very short notice, maybe within a few days. And he gave him a pretty good fight, and Andre Lima is on a tear right now. He's looking like one of the most promising prospects in the flyweight division. And even though he took that fight on short notice, he looked pretty solid. And then you look over at Suma Darji, and, he is on a 3-fight losing streak. It's not looking good for him. Matt Schnell, Tim Elliott. If you're losing to Tim Elliott these days, even though he's a dog, not looking very good for you. And Matt Schnell, who is now declining. And then coming off the win to Charles Johnson, but Charles Johnson is just a dog, one of the best strikers in the division, very fast, very zippy. So this is a very, very interesting fight. And I went back and forth on it because I don't want to totally dismiss Sumadarji because he's got UFC experience and he still has pretty solid skill. And I don't want to fully count Mitch Raposo out because it's, this is his pretty much his first, coming off his first UFC fight, which is a loss. So he doesn't have as much experience. But Mitch Raposo did look solid in that fight. And, I look at this as, this is do or die for Sumadarji. If he doesn't win this fight, he's probably going to get cut. And a lot of fighters, when their back is against the wall and their job is on the line, they wind up pulling it off and saving their job. Some don't, but a good chunk do. And I really went back and forth on it, and this is kind of a coin flip fight. It really is, because Sumadarji, he might come out and not look good and just get, just outstruck, and that's it, and he's cut and he's done. But I kind of, in this fight, even though I really am eyeballing Mitch Raposo to probably get this done and make a statement after a very close loss to Andre Lima, I am going to go ahead and lean towards Sumadarji to with that better UFC experience, a slightly more well-rounded skill set, plus he's got the height and he's got the reach on Mitch Raposo. He has, let's see, about like a 7 or 8 inch reach on him and 3 inches of height. So about a 7-inch reach. So, he has some advantages here, even though he's coming off 3 losses. So I am going to go ahead and give Sumadarji a chance to pick up a win and save his job. But Mitch Raposo could come out and wind up beating him 29-28, 30-27, and just outstriking him. So Sumadarji's really, really going to have to put on an impressive performance to save his job and to get back on track. But I'm going to give him a chance just because his back is against the wall. He's got the height, he's got the reach, and he's got the experience. But Mitch Raposo could get this done. He could pull off this upset. So I'm going to go ahead and stick with Sumadarji in this one. All right, and now we are moving on up to Chase Hooper versus Jim Miller, and a super, super fun fight here at lightweight. We are looking at the up-and-coming, streaking, hot prospect Chase Hooper versus the absolute veteran, the legend Jim Miller, and I love Jim Miller to death. How can you not like Jim Miller? Had a very hard kind of back and forth start to his UFC career. Years ago was battling Lyme disease. That took a lot out of him. And that was, responsible for a lot of his poor performances in the cage. But then he overcame the Lyme disease, and he has looked incredible in the second half of his career. I mean, at 41 years old, he is still winning fights, knocking guys out, submitting guys. He's had a few hiccups here and there against Bobby Green. Bobby Green's was one of the best defensive fighters in the game, very hard to deal with. But outside of that, Jim Miller has looked incredible in the second half of his career. And, he is still just, he's got pop in his hands. He still has that top level jiu-jitsu. But Chase Hooper is finally starting to really take form. He's really starting to take shape, and he is starting to become an up-and-coming problem. He had a little bit of a hiccup, early on when he was still developing, when he was really young at like 20, 21. But now he's starting to grow into his frame. He's starting to develop high-level skill, and he is becoming a problem. He is on a 4-fight winning streak, and now he's just submitting people left and right. His most impressive wins so far was the domination of Vyacheslav Borshev. That was incredible. He rocked Vyacheslav, hurt him, dropped him, got on top of him, submitted him. Very impressive. And then, of course, submitting the legend Clay Guida. But Clay Guida has been declining for a long time. So I do hold the Borshev win, his most impressive win so far. And in this fight, even though I love Jim Miller, and I have been very on the money picking Jim Miller and picking against him, I've had a very good read on it. In this fight, I would love to pick Jim Miller, and I would love for him to continue this incredible, just this rise that he's been on in the second half of his career. But I think Chase Hooper is just going to be too much for him. I think Chase Hooper, with the height, the little bit of the reach advantage, and just the skills that he's developing, I think Jim Miller's going to come in. He's going to be a dog for about a minute or two. It's going to look okay. And then I just think that Chase Hooper is just going to start putting the hands on him. And I think he's going to wrap Jim Miller up. They're going to hit the ground. Jim Miller's going to fight it off for a little bit, but then he's going to make a mistake. And I think Chase Hooper is going to wind up submitting Jim Miller. And, I love Jim Miller. I hope that he can, hang in there and make this a gritty fight and pull this win off. I would love to see it. I would also love to see Chase Hooper continue his streak, because it's kind of a battle here. But I think Chase Hooper is just, now he's hitting the point where he's a problem. He's really going to start putting it on these veterans that he gets matched up with. And, even though a lot of people have not submitted Jim Miller, and historically his submissions are his best game, his submission defense is solid. He's only been submitted, I think, 3 times in his entire career. But I think Chase Hooper is long enough, tricky enough, and he's got a deep enough spider web to really lock you into something. And I think he will catch Jim Miller, catch the aging veteran in something, and I think he winds up submitting him. So we're going to go Chase Hooper by first round submission. All right, and we are moving on up to Virna Jandiroba versus Yan Xiaonan, and a very, very good matchup here at women's strawweight. I mean, Virna Jandiroba has been looking absolutely impressive lately. She is on a massive 4-fight win streak. I mean, absolutely dominant in the grappling, completely dominant in her jiu-jitsu. That is her bread and butter. Her striking is not good, her technique is not good, her defense is not great at all. But she is a absolute handful to deal with in the grappling and the jiu-jitsu department. And then Yan Xiaonan has been, I mean, very, very impressive. Outside of her loss to Weili Zhang, which was a very good fight, in that fight, Weili did get her down. She did have her in a choke, and she went out. And it looked like the fight should have been over, but it was right on the horn, and she woke up as everybody was kind of like coming into the cage, and everybody was trying to get to the stools. So it was a real close submission loss for Yan Xiaonan in that fight, but she survived it, and she did lose the fight, but then she bounced back with the win against Tabitha Ritchie. And, Yan Xiaonan is absolutely fantastic on the feet. She has beautiful technique, beautiful striking, very sharp. She has all the fundamentals down. She keeps her, her hands up, good striking, good defense, and she's very, very hard to deal with on the feet. But one of her downfalls is her takedown defense. She has been taken down in multiple fights, and Zhang Weili was able to take her down multiple times in that fight. I think she took her down 6 times, if I remember. So that's a problem. And Zhang Weili is not really known for her takedowns and her grappling. That's not her bread and butter. That's kind of her secondary. So if someone like Zhang Weili is taking you down pretty easily, then I think someone like Virna Jandiroba, where that is her bread and butter, that's her number one, she is eventually going to get you down. Now, on the feet, Yan Xiaonan is going to light her up. As long as this fight's on the feet, Virna's losing the fight. But as soon as Virna gets in, closes that distance, and gets a hold of Yan Xiaonan, I mean, that's where she's eventually going to get the fight to the floor, and then it's going to be problems for Yan. And I don't think she's going to be able to keep the grappling and the takedowns at bay. I think Virna will get in with that awkward entry, that awkward way that she comes in. She will lock up the waist, she will get the trips, and she will get Yan down. But as long as this fight is on the feet, then, that's where Yan can take over, start to come back, and she could get it done on the feet. She could outstrike Virna. Maybe her takedown defense looks very solid. But even though it's a tough fight and it's almost a 50-50, and I really wanted to give Yan a chance in this fight, I think Virna's grappling and jiu-jitsu and control is going to be a little too much for Yan, and I do think she gets her down. I do think she takes the majority of these rounds with that grappling and control, and I think Virna is probably going to win this fight 29-28. So we are going to go Virna Jandiroba by decision in this one, but I hope Yan can make it competitive. I hope she can, keep it on the feet a little bit, make it a fun fight, but she has got a storm of grappling and jiu-jitsu to deal with in this fight, and I think Virna can get it done. All right, and now we are moving on up to one of the most anticipated fights of the night on the card. We are looking at Bryce Mitchell versus Jean Silva, and in this fight, I was never that high on, Bryce Mitchell to begin with. Like he is a good grappler. He's got good skills with his grappling and his wrestling. But outside of that, striking's not that great. Personality, his mental state is not good. The way that he thinks, the things that he says. And then you look at Jean Silva, who's just been an absolute killer over at the Fighting Nerds, and this man has the touch of death. I mean, he is knocking everybody out that he fights. Charles Jourdain, who's an excellent striker, a fantastic fighter, just put him away with an uppercut. Drew Dober, who is historically one of the toughest fighters in the division with one of the best chins. And then Melzik Bakhtasaryan, just blasting him. And in this fight, I'm not going to deny Bryce Mitchell's ability to wrestle, that grappling. That is a problem for a lot of guys. That's a problem for a lot of strikers. But in this fight, I think this is going to turn out like the Josh Emmett fight. I don't think Bryce is really going to get any solid takedowns in this fight. I think Jean Silva's going to press him, get in his face, start talking at him, just taunting him, getting him kind of like, oh boy. And then I think Jean Silva is just going to wind up pressing into him. It might be a little competitive for a little bit. Maybe Bryce grabs a hold of him, holds him against the cage. Maybe he kind of gets a half a takedown. Jean Silva's able to kind of stuff it out. And then I think it'll kind of be a lightly competitive in the first, with Jean mostly pressing him, coming at him, downloading him. And then in the second round, or actually I think at the very end of the first round, I think Jean is going to wind up hurting Bryce bad, rocking him bad. Bryce is going to be hurt, and then he's going to kind of get saved by the bell. Now, he could finish him in the first. He could come out, put the dog on him, put the pressure on him, and just knock him out cold dead. But I think Bryce will survive for a few minutes, get hurt towards the end of the round, and then when he comes out in the second round, I think Silva's going to put him away. I think Silva's going to land a nasty shot on him. I mean, just knock him flat dead to the floor, and I think he's going to wind up, if he's not out cold, he's going to just follow up and just throw nasty TKO shots. And I just cannot see Bryce just consistently taking him down. I don't see him having consistent success with the grappling. And I think Jean Silva will close in on him either in the first round or right at the start of the second round and blast him. But I'm going to go ahead and say that he hurts Bryce Mitchell in the first. Bryce survives. It goes into the second. And then in the first half of the second, Silva knocks him out. I'm going Jean Silva second round KO in this fight. All right, and now we are looking at Yair Rodriguez versus the debuting Patricio Pitbull, and this is a very, very fun fight. Patricio Pitbull was doing great work over in Bellator for years, an absolute killer over there. Had some ups and downs, but, one of the top fighters in Bellator, and I always looked at Patricio and said, one day that guy's going to be in the UFC. If Michael Chandler is going to make it to the UFC, Patricio Pitbull will eventually make it to the UFC, and now he's here. He has made it to the UFC, had a few losses to Sergio Pettis and Chichiro Suzuki, but did come off the win against Jeremy Kennedy. But that was a year ago, and now he's 37 years old, coming off a year layoff since the last fight. And he is going up against one of the most dynamic, fantastically fun fighters in the UFC in Yair Rodriguez. And Yair Rodriguez, he is just an absolute machine. The way that he fights, his tornado style is so hard to deal with. He is a barrage of kicks, spin kicks, hook kicks, punches, elbows. Yair mixes it up better than anybody, and he does it more effectively than just about anybody in the company. And yes, Yair Rodriguez has had some ups and downs. He's come off some losses. The loss to Brian Ortega, the loss to Alexander Volkanovski when he was the champion. But outside of that, Yair Rodriguez is still a handful to deal with for anybody. His style is just so dynamic and so powerful. And he throws so much at you, so many reads, so many attacks. You never really know what's coming. And in this fight, even though it's a very interesting matchup, and this is Patricio's debut, and he was one of the top fighters over in the B League, I do look at this fight and go, he is 37 years old. He's coming into the elite of the elite, the top level promotion, very late in his age. He's pushing into his 40s almost, and he's only 5'6", and he is 1-2 in his last 3. So that does say a lot. And, even though he does have good striking and he has deadly power in his hands, Yair Rodriguez is just a handful to deal with at range. He's very good at keeping space, very good at keeping you back, very good at getting in and out, landing kicks, landing shots, and keeping that space. And unless Patricio Pitbull can literally close in, get through the kicks to the body, get through the kicks to the leg, get through the shots, the jabs, the elbows, unless he can get through and land a big shot and knock Yair out, which rarely ever happens, which I don't, outside of Alexander Volkanovski KOing him, I don't think it's going to happen. I think Yair is just going to be too much. The dynamic attack, the range, the space, the leg kicks, his ability to mix it up. And it's just going to be just too much for Patricio, and I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be an exciting fight. I think it's going to be back and forth. I don't think he's going to knock Patricio out, but I do think that Yair Rodriguez outstrikes Patricio Pitbull 30-27. And I think it should be pretty much a unanimous decision. I don't think this fight will be super close, because I just don't think that Patricio is going to land enough significant shots on Yair. He might land a few in a round. He might steal a round, make it a 29-28. but that dynamic attack, and Yair's still 32, still in his prime, so, tall, long for the division, and so dynamic. I think it's just going to be hard for Patricio, and I think Yair is going to just edge these rounds with all that wonderful, beautiful, crazy dynamic attack, and I do think he beats Patricio in this fight. All right, and now we are moving on up to Nikita Krylov versus Dominic Reyes, and very interesting fight here at light heavyweight. We are looking at the now starting to pick it up and starting to kind of surge again, Dominic Reyes, the resurgence of Dominic Reyes, which now we are kind of comfortably settling back into because it was looking really bad for Dominic Reyes after he got atrociously fucked over in the Jon Jones fight. One of the worst robberies in UFC history. Absolutely deplorable call by the judges there, and that pretty much derailed him into a horrible 4-fight losing streak, and he got knocked out multiple times brutally, and it looked like it was the end of Dominic Reyes. And then he was able to come back at 34 years old, and he knocked out Dustin Jacoby, and then it was like, oh man, could Reyes be back? It's like, we need one more fight to see where he's at, one more fight to make sure that he's back on track. And then he came in and he knocked out Anthony Smith, so I think Dominic Reyes is finally, even at 35, he's starting to get back on track, and we could see his second run towards the belt. His confidence is back, his technique's back, the things that got him to Jon Jones are coming back slowly. And then you look over at Nikita Krylov, and Nikita Krylov is a UFC veteran. He's very solid, a very good middle-of-the-road solid test in the division. And, he's been, a little up and down over the years, but Nikita's had some great wins. He's only 32. He looks much older, but, he's coming off, 3 wins against Alexander Gustafsson, Volkan Oezdemir, and Ryan Spann. So he is a tough fight, and he's very well-rounded. He's got good jiu-jitsu, good grappling. He's submitted guys off of his back. He's got pretty good striking. So he is a solid test to kind of step you up into the top 10 of the division and get you kind of to that higher level competition. And in this fight, even though Nikita Krylov is very well-rounded, and he does pose a solid problem to a lot of guys, I think Dominic Reyes can keep this momentum going. He is the better striker. Dominic Reyes will be the better striker in this fight. And the only thing that I would worry about is Nikita catching him with a big shot. But Nikita is historically not known for his one-punch power. He's not a very powerful striker. He's just a good volume striker that mixes it up well. But if Dominic Reyes can come out, keep his technique sharp, keep his defense sharp, I think he will outstrike Nikita Krylov in this fight all 3 rounds. Now, I wanted to pick Dominic Reyes by KO, and I feel like there's a very good chance of that happening. But historically, Nikita Krylov has been very, very tough to knock out. He's been very tough to put away. And I believe he has only been knocked out 1 time in his entire career. So he's got a good chin. He doesn't eat a whole lot of shots cleanly and consistently, even though he has lost fights by decision. But historically, he eats shots pretty well. And Dominic could come out. Dominic could catch him with a shot and TKO him. But I'm going to say that Dominic Reyes outstrikes him cleanly for 3 solid rounds. I think Dominic will pick up a 30-27. Maybe Nikita. I would only see the only way that Nikita could steal around is if he was to tie Dominic up and take him down. But on the feet, as long as the fight is on the feet, Dominic is winning this fight. As long as his confidence is there, his hands are there, and his chin and his defense are there, he should outstrike Nikita 30-27 in this fight. So we are going to go Dominic, the Dominator Reyes, to stay on track and resurge, hopefully back to secondary title dreams down the road. Alrighty, and now we are looking at the co-main event of the evening, and we are looking at Michael Chandler versus Paddy Pimblett, and this is such a interesting, fun fight, and I cannot wait to talk about it because, you look at Paddy Pimblett, one of the biggest stars in the company. So many fans behind him, such a unique look, such a unique personality, a fun personality, such a unique, heavy accent, So Paddy Pimblett had just stormed into the UFC, and he has been on the rise, and he has had so many just, fans behind him, the English fans, and he has looked pretty good in the UFC for the most part. For the most part, his skills are pretty solid. But Paddy Pimblett does have holes in his game. And I've said that from the beginning. He got cracked in his very first UFC fight and almost knocked out. He got hurt bad. He did come back and finish the guy, but Paddy absolutely has holes in his game. He has holes in his stand-up. He has holes in other areas. So, Paddy still has some work to do, and I do think somebody will eventually expose Paddy. I don't know if Paddy makes it to a belt without taking a loss first, without taking a setback first. Now, this fight will get him closer to a belt, to a title shot if he wins, but somebody is eventually going to expose Paddy Pimblett, and Jared Gordon should have already done that. Jared Gordon beat him in that fight, but the judges screwed him just to keep Paddy's momentum going, and judges do that. Sometimes there are fighters that, the company is really behind, they're on a streak, and if the fight's real close, let's just give it to the streaking young kid that's real popular. I know that happens in the decision making in judges' minds sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. And I think that was the case in that fight. So Jared Gordon should have beat him in that fight. And it was a really bad robbery. And even though Paddy does have some faults, he's still very talented. He does have pretty good striking, and he's got great jiu-jitsu. And then we look over at Michael Chandler, and Michael Chandler is balls to the walls, fucking pedal to the floor. All out excitement. Now, there is no denying that he is one of the most exciting fighters that you'll ever see. The most exciting fighter in the UFC. But that comes at his downfall. That is a detriment to Michael Chandler because he does not know how to pace himself in these fights. He comes out, he stays composed for a little bit, and then the minute he gets cracked or he cracks somebody, he is just lighting all his fireworks at once instead of pacing them out, and it's just, that is his negative. That is his kryptonite, is his inability to manage his excitement and his explosiveness in these fights. And that's what is getting him caught in so many fights, and this is why he's taken so many losses. This is why he got knocked out by Charles Oliveira. This is why he got beat by Justin Gaethje. Then in the Poirier fight, went for a big takedown, dumped him too quick, too fast. He got reversed, got submitted. And then in the Charles Oliveira fight, just same thing, getting too excited, getting too in his own head. And, and then on top of that, he's 38 years old. And he's primarily a striker. Yes, he's got wrestling. He is historically had some solid, wrestling occasionally, and that's his background. But he's just an explosive, balls-to-the-wall striker, and a lot of the top-level strikers are going to expose you for that. When you're wild and crazy and you don't manage your gas tank and you don't manage your technique, you're going to get caught by the elite, and that's what's happened here. And in this fight, I look back and forth at it, and I go, Michael Chandler has power in his hands. He's got that explosiveness. He's got that all-action style to really put it on you. And even though I think Paddy Pimblett is a little overrated, and I think he will eventually get exposed, I think Paddy Pimblett's technique and his jiu-jitsu are what's going to get him the win here. Paddy's going to stay calm. Paddy's going to stay calm. He's going to stay tactical. He's going to absorb, and he's going to take the shots from Chandler. And it'll be a fun, explosive back-and-forth first round for sure. But I think once that first round is over, Chandler's going to be locked into his I'm going to light all the fireworks. I'm going to go balls to the wall and let's just throw down. And that's what's going to cost him. And I think Chandler's going to come in swinging shots. Paddy's probably going to eat a bomb or two, take it, absorb it, and then Paddy's going to wind up getting him down. And I think Paddy submits him. I think it's going to be like the Poirier fight, where maybe Paddy eats a few shots, maybe just one or two, maybe three, and then he survives. He comes back, hits Chandler with the better technique, and then he gets him to the floor and he submits him. And if not, Paddy's going to win the decision because Chandler his fight IQ is just dog shit. 90% of the time it's dog shit. Even though it's exciting, it's not a smart way to win fights. And I think Paddy will wind up submitting him and kind of pulling off a Poirier win. It'll be kind of similar in that way, but we're going to go Paddy Pimblett by second round submission. If not, he wins the decision against Michael Chandler and he falls further down the ladder at 38 years old. All right, and we are moving on up to the main event of the evening, and I cannot wait to talk about this. We are looking at Alexander Volkanovski, the former champ, versus the streaking, the Terminator, the fantastically talented Diego Lopes. And I love this fight so much because, Ilia Topuria wound up shocking the world, knocking Alexander Volkanovski out, which was just devastating to watch. Incredible at the same time. And Alexander Volkanovski has been one of the greatest champions the UFC has ever had. Max Holloway was the greatest featherweight of all time, and I still think there was a case for him to be the greatest featherweight of all time. But Alexander Volkanovski came in, beat him in those fights, took that belt, and was so dominant for so long. And then he got knocked out by Islam in the rematch, unfortunately, taking it on short notice. And then Topuria knocked him out. So it has been really tough for Alexander Volkanovski in the last two fights, but he's still a solid fighter. He is still so well-rounded, and his technique is so beautiful. That is what gets Alexander Volkanovski most of his wins, is his fight IQ and his technique. He is so good at just downloading and timing and landing the proper shot and knowing when to be defensive. And he's so good at managing that gas pedal. But then you turn around and you look at Diego Lopes, and this kid has looked absolutely incredible since his very close loss to Movsar Evloev. I mean, he has been streaking, knocking out Pat Sabatini, knocking out Sadiq Youssef with the uppercut, beating Dan Ige, even though that was a short notice fight, and then coming off the very dominant win against Brian Ortega. So this kid has just looked so good. All the potential in the world, fantastic striking, phenomenal boxing, fantastic power, and fantastic jiu-jitsu, and he is big for a featherweight, and for a featherweight, he's 5'11", 72-inch reach, he's a solid frame, strong, fast, great hands, great speed, great technique. And, going back and forth, trying to kind of pick this fight apart, it's like, I think Alexander Volkanovski still has it in him. He still has the technique. He still has the ability, even though he is aging, he's getting up there, he's still going to beat a lot of guys in the division. He's such a challenge. And, he just poses such a fantastic, well-rounded problem to so many people. And even though he's, coming off these two brutal losses, I still feel like he's not fully done yet. He still has the potential to be a top fighter and can still maybe be champion again one day. But even though I went back and forth on it in this fight, I don't know if it's going to be against Diego Lopes, because even though Diego is still young, he's only 30 and he's still developing, what he has shown us so far is just undeniable. The kid is so good. His striking is so good. His technique, his speed, his well-roundedness, and his size. And I think that is going to be a problem in this fight for Volkanovski. I think it's going to be a tactical fight for a little bit. And Volk is going to be making his reads and landing kicks and finding and trying to download Diego. But I think at a point, Diego is just going to overwhelm him. And I think he's going to wind up catching Volk. And I hope Volk, I would love, the fan in me, the heart in me would love to see Volk, pull this off and get his belt back after two devastating losses, one being short notice. I would love to see him just get back on top of the mountain. But the facts are he's 36 years old. And he's coming off two hard losses, and now he's coming up against a killer who, even though he's still developing, he is showing us, tremendous steel door improvement. And he's just looking like such a handful to deal with. And even though I went back and forth on it, and I think Alexander Volkanovski, if he was able to avoid the power shots and stay defensively slick and mix it up real well, he could beat Diego Lopes. He could be the old veteran, the old dog that just kind of puts a beating on the young buck and he gets that belt back. I think it's very possible he can do it. But I just can't see Volk surviving those early rounds against Diego. I think Diego's just going to be too much. And I think Diego can maintain that for 5 rounds. I think he can. Even if he doesn't put Volk away early, I think he can maintain it down the road and even possibly still win a decision. But I think in this fight, Volk is going to look fine for about a round, maybe 2. And then somewhere in that second round, that third round, Diego's going to wind up just cracking him with boxing, sharp combinations, and hurting him, and probably TKOing him. So I am going to go Diego Lopes to knock Alexander Volkanovski out in the second round. Maybe the third, but I'm going to go second. And I think we will have a new, streaking, brand new champion and such an impressive talent on our hands. And I think he will walk out of there with that belt. But Volk is a veteran. Volk's a dog. Volk is very well-rounded. And he could get this done with all that experience and that phenomenal, well-rounded game. But I think Diego is the deal. I think he's the real deal. I think he's a problem. And I think he'll get it done. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching my prediction. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe. Please like the video. It massively helps me out. And I will see you for my predictions for UFC 315. Take care.